It only took 2 weeks for things to get very serious. At first, there were sandstorms, then the constant falling meteorites that endangered our colony, and now there was malnutrition. My name is Nikolai Arilano, and I'm an engineer and one of the first colonists on Kepler 186f. Our mission was to establish a functioning colony away from Earth in the first extrasolar expedition. And though we were quite successful at first, the first 2 weeks were not without challenges. It is beginning of week 3, and welcome to What the Math. And so the week has started. We had so many things to do. We had to resolve our problem with malnutrition and make sure it does not repeat itself. The lab was supposed to provide new type of food for us, and I've decided to construct it right here, right next to the storage area. This would obviously ensure easy transportation of various foods across our base, and also would supply us with a variety of various nutritious meals and hopefully prevent malnutrition from happening ever again. The construction has begun. The things were going well. We had to work fast, and hopefully within 1 day would be able to have a functioning lab. The shortage of metal became quite a common occurrence in this colony. We could only produce metal by using this large machine with the ore that we've gathered from the mines nearby. But unfortunately, all of this took a really long time, and each piece of metal that we had to use for construction took several hours to produce. Nevertheless, with teamwork and with the really good placement of both the mine and the entrance and of course the processing plant, we were able to produce quite a lot of metal relatively quick. I decided to take a walk through our base and see if I could help someone else with something that did not require engineering. I've worked on the semiconductor foundry for several hours and it was really getting to me. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to try to help someone with something else. But I was also getting very hungry. I've been eating the same vegetables just like everyone else for 2 weeks, and it was kind of getting to me. But I was also, of course, very tired and very sleepy. Nevertheless, this was going to be my last meal of the day. I wanted to prepare my dinner and then head to bed. And as I went to bed, we've actually finished our lab and the construction was now complete. We now could actually produce new types of food. In order for this lab to be very efficient, we had to produce something called a tissue synthesizer. This was a schematic we've received from Earth right before we left, which would allow us to produce synthetic meat. And even though most of us were actually vegan, and this was a prerequisite for this mission as we were aware that the meat would be very hard to come by on other planets, nevertheless, our bodies required it and craved for the taste of meat. The synthetic meat would obviously be produced from various types of beans, but it would have the nutrition and the texture needed for us to actually enjoy it, while also getting all the required nutrients and obviously preventing malnutrition from happening again. And as the morning came, I've completed the structure and decided that it was time for us to try these machines. We had a tissue synthesizer, but we also constructed something to help us produce medicine for our colony in case we need more medical help or medical assistance. I was pacing back and forth, uncertain if it's going to work. I wanted to actually see if we can construct some sort of a meal using this new synthesizer, and if the medical bench also is going to produce some kind of a useful material for us. But then I also decided that it was time for us to build another one of the metal processors because it was important for us to construct as much metal as possible. This was the time. It was time to see if it was going to work. We decided to try to construct our first artificial meat. Our biologist, Laika, was the first to try the machine. He started to work on it and decided it was time for us to make something a little bit more delicious. He actually decided to construct something that he would call spiken, which was of course space chicken. And spiken was nothing but a combination of various plants mixed together with various minerals in order to construct something that actually tasted like chicken. But whether this was going to taste like chicken and whether it's going to be good enough for us to eat, only time could tell. We had our first artificial meat ready. It was now time to try it, and we weren't sure who was going to be the first lucky person or possibly a victim of this experiment. None of us were brave enough to try it, but I think the hunger would take over. And it looks like it was going to be Songming. She could not stand it anymore. She could smell the meat from everywhere in the base, and she was getting really hungry. She went to the meal maker and got her first meal. And so she decided to give it a try. This was a first evening when we got to actually share a meal that tasted somewhat like meat. She was really excited about it because it didn't taste as bad as she thought it would, and it actually kind of did taste like chicken. Sonmin Leo has not been so happy for a really long time, and it was a very silly thing to be happy over, but a taste of chicken also brought back the taste of home. And because the meal maker could actually customize your meal for you, her meal actually tasted like a meal she used to eat when she was young and lived in the southern Chinese city of Chengdu. For her, this brought back a lot of really good memories about home, and she was now motivated to work a lot harder than before. She decided to produce more meals so that everyone else on our base could now taste this magnificent new meal that she did not have a name for yet. So things started to pick up again. We had just enough energy, we had a new power collector that could actually store a lot of energy for most of our base overnight, and only a few parts needed some maintenance, which I was actually going to get to this day. Unfortunately, we actually ran out of spare parts, so I had to start making more in order for us to actually be able to fix up the base relatively quickly. And with the first spare part that we made at home, our little robot was able to actually fix everything by himself, even without my help. And even though you would think that fixing a wind turbine would be a delicate task, these little machines could actually do it way faster and much better than me. Which actually reminded me that I needed to get back to the task of constructing at least our first robot. I was still missing the semiconductor to construct my first bot, and the semiconductor foundry was unfortunately at only 22% progress. But because building a bot right now was a priority for me and we had no other missions or no other tasks in mind, I've decided to actually get back to work and see if I could finally finish it. Because having a third robot would actually save us so much more time. And even if it was just a cargo bot, it would actually allow us to transport various tools, various goods around the base in much more efficient manner. But unfortunately, I was not able to finish it this night, and I decided to call it a night. This was night 15 on this beautiful planet, and everything was just going fine. We had just enough energy, we had a lot of water and oxygen, and everyone was happy with the new meals we were able to create in the tissue synthesizer in our new lab. Nobody was getting sick anymore, and everyone seemed to be just happy. I've decided to get back to work in the middle of the night because I just could not sleep, knowing that my semiconductor was still not finished. This little factory has become my second home away from home, and I've spent more time in here than I did in any other module in our base. I've become really familiar in constructing semiconductors and spare parts, and if I ever went back home, I would have quite an extended resume to show off to my new employers. But we all knew that it was very unlikely that I was going to go home anytime soon. But the priority for us was not semiconductors but spare parts. I've decided to make another spare part because some of the buildings and some of the modules around our base started to get worn off due to all of the storms we've experienced on this planet. Having a lot of spare parts would actually ensure that our base was functioning at 100% or close to 100% capacity, and that we would not have any power, oxygen or water outages ever again. But because I built a second metal processor, we finally actually started to have a surplus of metal, which was actually really good news for me, as an engineer who always wants to have as much metal as possible. But I think for me this was the end of another day because I was just too tired and too sleepy to continue. I've decided to finish my night with a little bit of a dinner and created a meal based on an old Russian cuisine. I then proceeded to bed and decided it was time for me to take a little bit of a nap. And as I was falling asleep, I decided to plan out my day for the next day, as I needed to create more spare parts and finally finish the semiconductor that was actually almost done. And even though I've actually said it so many times before and have made that goal before, I've decided that this was the day when I'm finally going to build that bot. I was not going to give up, I was going to finish the semiconductor, and I was going to construct the third robot to help us with everything on the base. And the semiconductor was finally finished. The little CR1 carrier bot placed it inside the bot workshop, and we could now begin the construction of the bot. I walked over to the robotics facility bot workshop and began my construction. I was so excited. This was almost like Christmas. Now it was all new to me. I had no idea what I was really doing, but I was following the instructions from Iker and the manuals we've received from Earth on the way to this planet. It was not going to be easy, it was gonna take me a long time to construct this bot, but I was determined to finally build it. I started to come up with different names for this little friend that we're about to create and decided to settle for something simple from back home. I've named her Laika. This was the name of the first dog in space sent by the Soviet Union in the beginning of the space program when the US and the Soviet Union were trying to compete for the supremacy in space. And even though Laika was considered to be a hero back in the Soviet Union, he was quite forgotten in the new Russia. And because I thought it was important for people to remember this little doggy that went to space, I thought naming this bot after that dog would actually inspire a new generation of space explorers, while at the same time remind me that I have a new robotic friend that will always assist me and always be by my side. And Laika was finally ready. She was beautiful. She was a robot. And right away she started doing work. Went to get some metal and helped me construct more spare parts because some of our solar panels and also turbines were actually unfortunately getting damaged by meteorites and sand from the sandstorms. My little new friend was absolutely incredible. I was so happy and so thrilled with myself that I could not hide my excitement. There was a huge smile on my face and I was singing my favorite songs from my childhood as I was creating a new pair of spare parts. This was a great day and we finally finished the mission I started so many days ago. The robot was ready, the base was functional, and everyone was excited about the future. We still didn't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we knew that for today we've achieved quite enough and we've accomplished a lot more than we imagined in what seemed like only 20 days. The night has fallen upon us and we went to bed, knowing that tomorrow we'll have more things to do, more things to discover, and possibly more challenges to deal with. What will happen tomorrow, we do not know, but we'll find out in the next video. Thank you for watching, bye bye.